Fair warning, this video will be periodically interrupted by me playing fetch with my cat. Baby? Go. Here are 7-ish, and I'll explain the ish at the end, science fiction novels that I have read recently and I recommend to you. These are all pretty diverse, they're all pretty interesting, each one of them interprets science fiction a little bit differently, and I think they are all worth your time, so let's not waste any more of it. Let's go. I'm going to start off on a very, very strong note with my favourite of the whole bunch. Redshirts by John Scalzi. This is the first John Scalzi book I've read. I have already bought another one and I am about to start reading it. I'm completely obsessed with his writing just from this book. This is an amazing piece of science fiction. I was addicted to this book like I haven't been addicted to a book in a long time. I had fun with it in the way I haven't had fun with a book in a long time. Redshirts is a riot, but it's also very, very clever. In order to fully appreciate this novel, I guess you would have to have some background knowledge of Star Trek, or maybe not. I'd at least advise understanding what a red shirt is, which I'll quickly do now. In the original Star Trek TV series with Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner, created by Gene Roddenberry, there was a kind of a pattern that developed into a joke after a while about people called red shirts. You see, on the Starship Enterprise, depending on your role on the ship, you wore a different coloured outfit. Command officers wore gold or yellow, science officers wore blue, and pretty much everyone else wore red. And red shirts were often interpreted as disposable. Many, many episodes would begin with an away team going to a space station or a planet or another ship. The away team would have 1 or 2 members of the core cast who were all bridge crew, the captain, the science officer, the first officer, blah blah blah, and a random guy who had no dialogue, wore a red shirt, and almost immediately got killed. It was a funny joke for decades. It still is. People use red shirts in fiction as shorthand for disposable characters. But this book takes that idea and really runs with it, turns it into a conspiracy. Ready? Ready? Go! Go, go. Redshirts is set in a world very, very similar to that of Star Trek. It's a few hundred years in the future, humanity is a spacefaring race, they meet weird alien cultures, they hang out with them, they go on missions and adventures, blah blah blah. Our protagonist is a redshirt. He joins a starship, he's very excited. You learn a lot about his background very early on in this weird exposition dump as he meets other redshirts and you get to know this small group of people. There's a lot of humour in it immediately and it moves at such a pace. This is a quick book. It doesn't waste a single second. It gets right to the action and you move and you move and you move and the conspiracy builds up real quick as he and the other red shirts are introduced to people who've been on the ship a while and have realized that there's a lot of weirdness here. There are bits of technology on the ship that work too well. When there's some kind of problem, a really serious problem like a disease breaks out on the ship, they notice very quickly that there's some random piece of tech that can just fix it. They also notice the pattern that if you're on an away team with the captain, the first officer, etc., members of the bridge crew, you're gonna die. And they've even got like a calculation. Like if you go down to a planet with just 1 bridge crew member, like the captain, your chances of survival are 0. If you go down with 2, your chances are a bit higher. If you go down as one of 2 red shirts with 1 bridge crew member, the maths changes all the time and they've kind of figured out a pattern here. But why? This isn't a TV show, this isn't Star Trek, this is, well, it's fiction, but it's a real place to them, so what the hell is going on? The conspiracy is fascinating, it is so much fun, and you kind of find out what's going on about 1/3 of the way through the book, and then everything changes again. I won't give you any more details because the twists and turns are very much part of the fun. Finding out what's really going on here is the plot, it's the point. It is very, very fun, it is very, very funny, and it is surprisingly philosophical. I had so much fun with this, and I now want to read everything that John Scalzi writes, has ever written, and I'm going to enjoy doing so. While I've got you here listening to me talk about good books, if you've written a book or a story, or you know someone who has, I now offer book editing services. These services are thorough, they are detailed, and they are affordable. Before you self-publish a book or send it to an agent or an indie publisher, you really need to get it edited. I'm sure you know that. And as a book critic and former English teacher, I am thoroughly enjoying my work as a freelance book editor. The clients I've worked with so far have been very, very pleased with my service. So if you've written a book or you know someone who has, send it over to me and I will edit it, I will proofread it, I will copy edit it. There is a link in the description to my services and all of the details are there, including the pricing. Plug done, on with the video. This is The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling, a fantastic blend of science fiction and horror, very much in the vein of movies like Event Horizon, Alien, and Sunshine. But I've never seen that kind of sci-fi horror done in a novel before. And even though it's in that vein, this is still a wonderfully original book. I will say up front that my one gripe with this is that it's too long. And that is often a gripe I have with books when I feel like my time is slightly being wasted. When it comes to this book, I feel like it just could have been trimmed a little bit. It's 400 pages long and 300 would have done. 350 even. Just cut things back a little bit. It's a little too long, so there is a lull in the middle that really bugged me, but apart from that, this is a very unique piece of horror science fiction. It's set in the future, at a time when humanity is mining other planets for their resources. There is a colony set down on a planet that's very rocky and uninhabited, and under that rock are resources that people want to mine for. But mining is a dangerous thing, and our protagonist is a cave diver, someone who goes down into the caves below the earth to map out a route that miners can take, to figure out what exactly is down there, the canary down the mine. Sometimes these cave divers go down in groups, other times they are solo. Our protagonist is solo, and she's down there for a long time, weeks. Alone. And the only point of contact she has is a voice in her head. This voice is attached to a real person. This is a radio communication with a port of call, someone who can keep our character company, support her with all of her needs, and her suit that she wears permanently actually injects her with food and water and nutrients and medicine and everything she needs. It's really fun tech. But the person she's in contact with isn't very friendly, isn't very forthcoming, is very standoffish and stoic, and the novel's very much about their relationship, their connection as they slowly get to know each other and peel back the layers. But it's also such a claustrophobic book. You are down there in those caves with her. She's exploring, she's asking questions, she wants to understand what's down here. Other people have gone down there before, some have made it back, some haven't. That means there must be bodies down here. Maybe there are ghosts, we don't know. In a way, this is kind of a haunted house story, but the house is a cave system beneath an alien world. What could be down there? What will she discover? And how much of it will be in her own head? Will she start going crazy with loneliness and claustrophobia? You don't know. I had all these questions going in, and obviously they get answered. This book is all atmosphere. The science fiction element is clever, but not heavy-handed. You could argue that it's a bit more horror than it is sci-fi, but just like Alien, it blends the two really nicely. This is space horror, and it is dripping with atmosphere. The sense of mystery, the fear of the unknown, the claustrophobia, it really makes you itchy as you read, and I was so impressed by that. This crawled all over my skin, and I kind of welcomed it, because you don't get that feeling very often. This is a very unique piece of science fiction horror, and I urge you to check it out if you like both of those genres. This is The Principle of Moments by Esme Gikiemi Pearson. At the time of making this video, this is a brand new piece of science fiction, hence the hardcover. I was so excited to check this out that I went out and got it the day it was published. I love what the author has had to say about the book and its kind of mission in adding to the far too small number of great black writers of science fiction. Both science fiction and fantasy are historically both very dominated by white male voices. In fantasy, we've seen that change a lot over the last 20 years now. But in science fiction, not so much. And as a black British woman, Gikiemi Pearson is helping change that. As it turns out, this book is actually kind of fantasy. In the vein of things like Doctor Who and Star Wars, this is science fantasy far more than it is science fiction. And that's great, I love science fantasy. It starts off very, very sci-fi heavy, and then the fantasy elements bleed in slowly. Actually, no, that's a lie. They do not bleed in. They jump in, and it's a lot of fun. I will say up front, I don't think this book will change your life. It didn't change mine, but it's certainly a fun adventure to be had. At the beginning, we have two protagonists, and a third gently gets introduced around the 30-ish% mark. One of these protagonists is Asha, a young human girl who lives in a far future. As it turns out, and unsurprisingly, humanity ruined Earth and had to leave. We destroyed our home and escaped escape to the stars on a generation ship. Eventually, after a long time, the children's children of the people who left arrive on a new planet in a new galaxy. But they're not there long. They barely manage to build anything before they find out that this planet is actually at the edge of a galactic empire. That empire has a new leader, and that leader lands on the planet because he wants to build a military base and a university there. He finds these humans here, and he enslaves them. They've been enslaved for a while now. Asha was born on this planet, born into slavery. And of course, she dreams of escaping. That's her first chapter. But then we move backwards to Victorian London. We meet a time traveler. His name is Obi, and he is a natural time traveler, as was his father. But Obi has contracted a kind of disease that time travel can give you, where parts of your body just fail and die and drop off. It's really gnarly. Obi's been traveling through time looking for his dad. But while in Victorian London, he happened to fall in love with Mad King George's grandson, whose name is also George. He's a prince at this time, but he would eventually become king, would have no children, and so the throne passed to his cousin, Queen Victoria. But our time traveler Obi has fallen in love with him. And after searching through the timeline for his dad and failing, he decides, okay, I'm gonna stay in Victorian London. He goes to visit his boyfriend, the prince. The two of them reunite after like 3 years. But eventually, Obi will end up traveling into the future and meeting with Asha, and the two of them will go on an adventure. And this is where the fantasy element kind of forces its way into the book. Because there is a prophecy, because there is a legend, because there is a mythology. These two characters and a third character they meet a bit later are kind of reincarnations of a myth, of a legend. They are destined to travel and save people and blah blah blah, and suddenly it goes from being science fiction, very intriguing science fiction, to a kind of tropey fantasy novel in space with a bit of time travel. Now, I like science fantasy in the Star Wars sense, where you have basically a fantasy story in space, but this kind of tries to blend the two. It starts off as just sci-fi, and then suddenly it feels like cliched fantasy in space, and I don't know, it really reads like a debut novel. I don't think the blend of science fiction and fantasy is done well here, but I still had such a fun time on this adventure with these people. I enjoyed the characters, I really enjoyed the premise and the structure, and the sci-fi elements are great. The themes of enslavement and belonging and purpose, the way that it explores colonialism from an historical and a science fiction angle is really, really smart, and just for that alone, I appreciate this book and I think you should check it out. Now, these next two I'm not going to spend too long on, only because they each have their own dedicated videos already. This is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. She was a Belgian author who is sadly no longer with us, and this was translated from the French by Roz Schwartz. This is a wonderfully strange, very much character-driven piece of post-apocalyptic science fiction. Our protagonist is the youngest of a group of 40 women who all live in a cage in a bunker. She, who is nameless, has never seen the sun. She's never seen outside of this bunker. This place is all she knows. It's all she remembers. The other 39 women have fragmented memories of their past lives. People they loved, jobs they had, even children. But they've been here longer than they can remember. Time has slipped away. Their memories have gotten fuzzy. And our protagonist is young. She's an early teenager. She's growing up in this place, and she has these women for company, and they are her family, they are her community, they are all she knows. They're kept in this cage by male guards who never speak to each other, never speak to the women, never speak at all. And the women have no idea why they're there. They don't know what's going on, but this is all they know now. This is just their life. I Who Have Never Known Men is a wonderfully clever book, in that it very much explores the concept of humanity, what it means to be human. If you strip away culture and history and social rules and etiquette, what is left? What makes a person in those circumstances, in that situation? What makes a family? What makes a community? What makes a person as they grow? They try to understand their body and their mind, the people around them. They want to learn, they want to understand things, but they have no frame of reference. And this book very much has a 3-act structure, and at the end of the first act, they do leave. They are able to escape their cage and wander whatever is out there. I won't tell you what's out there, but they are free to explore, free to discover, and she has a chance at understanding the world on a much grander scale. I was really touched and amazed by this book. People have been talking about it a lot recently. I had never even heard of it until recently. I checked it out and I'm really, really amazed. This is many people's favorite novel. I've talked to a lot of people who said as much, and I get it. This is a magnificent piece of fiction. Arguably feminist, but I talk more about that in my video. If you want to know more, watch that. But I really, really recommend this. And this is Your Utopia by Bora Chung, translated from the Korean into English by Anton He. At the time of recording, this has just come out. This is a review copy, and I reviewed it just recently. Bora Chung wrote Cursed Bunny, which was an amazing collection, also translated by Anton He. It leaned into the horror and the creepiness and the weirdness a lot more than this does, because this is pure science fiction. Every story in here is a sci-fi story, but each of them is different and unique, and as I said in my review, they really explore the scope of human emotion and the scope and spectrum of science fiction itself, because every story pretty much treads a different theme, element, and trope of sci-fi. Space travel, artificial intelligence, language, what it means to be human, all of these things are explored here. There's a dark, bleak, comedic element to these stories, as is always the case with Bora Chung. Her stories are often tongue-in-cheek, satirical, kind of funny, and often very, very bleak, to the point that you'll laugh, but you'll feel guilty for laughing. Sometimes these are very political stories about things like climate change. Other times they are stories that just ask us to question what it means to love, what it means to live, what it means to be born and die. This is a wonderful collection to really showcase what science fiction can do, the effects that the genre can have on the reader, and how it makes us engage with ourselves. I am always impressed by Bora Chung. I continue to be impressed by her. Go watch my review for my full thoughts, but this is a collection worth reading, absolutely. Korean science fiction is wonderfully unique. It is everywhere right now. There's so much great Korean sci-fi to check out, and this is obviously one of them. I talked about this book recently in a video on young adult fiction that I've been enjoying, because I recently got into YA and found out it's actually fantastic, which I naively assumed wasn't true for so long, as many adult readers do. So yes, this is a YA science fiction novel by Joan He. The Ones We're Meant to Find. It is very much a character-led story, but the science fiction in here is so clever and appealing and intriguing. It's set on Earth in the future, where climate change caused by us has led to a consistent bombardment of natural disasters. All the time, everywhere, there are things happening. Like hurricanes and tornadoes and tsunamis, the world is ravaged by natural disaster. But about 25% of what's left of humanity live in these suspended cities, eco-cities. And rather than the people who get to live there being rich and powerful and famous, they're the people who have something to offer, the people who are very intelligent, people who are paving the way in the realms of science and engineering, who might be able to fix the world. And our protagonists are sisters. When we begin, one of these sisters lives in one of these eco-cities. She's the younger sister. It's been 3 months since her older sister just up and disappeared, left the city, and we don't know what happened to her. And this younger sister isn't very sociable. She's the introvert. She's not good at socializing, she doesn't enjoy it, but it is her duty sometimes to do so because she is a young prodigy. People are expecting great things of her, revolutionary things. And her sister's situation is entirely different because we pick up her story 3 years later. She has been trapped alone on a deserted island for 3 years now, and she barely remembers who she was before, what her life was before. All she really knows now is this island, and the one concrete thing she has in her head, the only memory she has, is of a sister, a younger sister, that she remembers and she wants to get back to. It is a primal urge more than anything. I know I need to escape this island, I don't know how I got here, but I must get off to get back to my sister, and that's it. As I said, this is a very character-led story. We get to know these two girls very, very well. We get to know their relationship to each other in spite of the fact that they are separated, and we watch as they try to reunite learn where the other is and what's going on exactly. The chapters on the island are a lot of fun. At least at first, there's kind of a joviality to what's going on. She has this little robot companion that is all but useless, and she makes lots of fun quips about the robot and at the robot. There's also a cabin. I'm trying carefully not to spoil anything here, but early on she mentions that the cabin is owned by someone, but we don't know who that person is. She just uses their initials. That person doesn't seem to exist. She didn't build the cabin, it's full of supplies, but she is alone here. So you have so many questions right from the get-go. And that's what's so fun about it. The island chapters are full of mystery and strangeness and you want to understand what's going on. But the city chapters are far more exposition heavy. You learn so much about the world, how it's falling apart, how things are functioning, the state of humanity, the rules and regulations, and the science, the technology they have and what they're doing with it. You learn a lot very quickly. And it's really nice to cut back and forth between these, have a jump between lots and lots of exposition and good world building, and a weird minimalist mystery island. The jump between the two constantly is a lot of fun and it really keeps the pages turning. This is a wildly inventive and brilliant piece of young adult science fiction. Those were 6 books that I massively recommend. And the reason I said 7-ish is because I didn't finish Skyward Inn by Aaliyah Whiteley, and I'm kind of sad about that. See, I really like the works of Aaliyah Whiteley, or at least what I've read, which is just one book, which is called The Beauty. The Beauty is a really weird piece of speculative fiction about a world where all that's left are men, and the men end up accidentally kind of growing mushroom people who grow into versions of the women that they knew, their wives and mothers and girlfriends, and they're these weird yellow mushroom people. It feels like a Star Trek episode in a really twisted and weird way. And it gets dark and bleak and awkwardly funny. At least that's what I remember. It's been a few years since I read it, but The Beauty is great. Loads and loads of fun. Skyward Inn, however, I was so looking forward to and I couldn't get into it. I didn't finish it. I read about 100 pages and I was just done. That said, I still want to recommend it because I like her work and I think that a lot of people will love this. This is very much a case of me not vibing with a book, at least right now. Maybe I'll return to it one day, but me still wanting to get the word out about it because it doesn't mean the book is bad. I just wasn't feeling it. Maybe you will. And that means it's worth talking about. And the premise is super duper interesting. Our protagonists are a couple who run an inn called the Skyward Inn. This inn is very much like an old English country pub, and it's somewhere in the British countryside. This couple are Jem and Eiley. Jem is a human woman, and Eiley comes from a planet called Kita. Kita was invaded by humans when we discovered wormhole technology and were able to easily get to their planet. There was some kind of a war, and Jem spent her time on that planet, protesting against that war, spreading anti-war propaganda, and trying to find peace. And now there seems to be peace, but our knowledge of these events is very, very fragmented, very strange, and at first there seemed to be a lot of hypocrisies around it. And now these two just run this inn. But we slowly get to know about the politics on Earth, which are very different now. Earth has been gerrymandered and carved out in a very different way. There are unfamiliar terms like the Western Protectorate, and you have to figure out what the Western Protectorate is, what countries it's comprised of, etc. But also, most importantly, we need to know what happened on Key. So my camera's battery just died and I had to charge it, and now I can't remember what I was saying about Skyward Inn, which I guess doesn't matter too much since I didn't finish it. But I still recommend it because I can tell that it's good. It just wasn't for me right now. So read it if you're interested. But I can kind of make it up to you by showing you a purring cat, you know? There. Look how pretty. Look how pretty. My little baby. My little baby. If you're new to this channel, this is Mary Wollstonecraft. She's my kitten. She's like 6 months old, I think. And she likes to bite my face. Okay, there you go. Cool, Sci-Fi. Subscribe for books.